What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 29 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today I want to talk to you about The Definitive Shi. This is written and drawn by a gentleman named Billy Tucci. It started in the early 90s, and I don't know what comics are collected here because this is more of a presentation problem that I have with this book, but it does not tell you what comics are collected here. Not in the front, not in the back. It doesn't tell you anywhere, so that's kind of a problem with this book. So I don't know what's collected here, but this is, 400, 500 something pages of graphic novel here, and She was a comic that started in the early 90s, like I said, lasted like 11 something years. It lasted a good long while. Basically, this woman, she witnessed her father and brother die at the hands of Yakuza, I believe it was, and then she spends her entire life training to get revenge and kind of take down the criminal empire that took away her family. And she's kind of a divided soul because on her mother's side, she's Catholic, but then on her father's side, she's got all this Japanese honor and stuff that demands that she seeks retribution for the loss of her family. And so she's trying to fight both of these sides of her life and trying to reconcile them and become one single mind with a single purpose, but it's difficult because these two sides of her are very conflicting. And if that sounds interesting, you would be right. It does sound interesting. Unfortunately, the book does not handle it very well. In fact, this series is not very good. I have numerous problems with this book. It will just introduce characters and expect you to know who they are, and then it'll say, okay, you can check out this character in this other comic book that's not collected in this book. And then I still have no idea who this character is because they just kind of show up and then they just kind of disappear. And then it will have major supporting characters who are supposed to be like an actual part of this book, and they will just kind of do things and then they'll disappear or they'll die. And I'm thinking, okay, I feel like I'm supposed to be feeling something when this supporting character dies, but I don't, because they just kind of went off and did something, and I don't really understand their character. I don't really understand what is driving that character. So whenever they go off and they do this thing, they commit this action, or they get killed, I don't feel anything because that character feels very hollow. Also, there's a text piece collected in this book that Kurt Busiek wrote, and this was like right around the time when Astro City was first getting started, and Kurt Busiek is praising the series very highly, talking about how wonderful it is, and he says when it first started, he thought that it was just going to be another boobs, butts, and bullets comic, I think is what he called it. And that's kind of what it is. This doesn't have very much substance to it. He says, Kurt Busiek says, that it does, and not to dispute a man who I respect very much as a writer, but he's wrong. This book does not have a lot of substance to it. It's mostly just she and then her friend Tomo in various semi-erotic poses holding swords and stuff. That's basically the substance of this book. Now, I will go ahead and say one good thing about this book. So, roughly 3/5 of the book is actually comic book stuff. Here's some comic stuff that you can kind of see. But then, when you get towards the end of the book, you start getting what I think is some really cool stuff. So, Anna, that's the name of the protagonist, her grandfather was the one who kind of imparted a lot of the Japanese wisdom onto her when she was growing up. So, a lot of the stuff that she learned from her father's side of the family, she learned from her grandfather. And we get many pages in the back of the book that illustrate a little bit of her past with her grandfather. And it will be like an illustration done by somebody who is not Billy Tucci. There was a whole bunch of artists like Amanda Connor, Jim Lee, I think Mike Mignola might have done one, but you'll have a big 2-page illustration like this, and then you'll have some captions that are showing the grandfather talking to the girl about something that happened in Japanese history, and then he's explaining how this is something that's applicable to her in her present day life. I really liked all of that. I really liked that it gave her a little bit more of a deeper backstory than what she had in the comic book part of this book. I liked that it showed her relationship with her grandfather. I really wish we could have had this level of writing and this level of craft in the rest of the book, because the rest of the book feels like typical action 90s comic books that are really bad. This part of the book feels really good, and it feels like it's written by an entirely different person, and I really wish that we could have had more like this. Not necessarily illustrated prose like what this is, I just wish that we could have had more of her relationship with her grandfather coming to the forefront in the rest of this story. Unfortunately, we don't. This only takes up maybe a sixth of the entire book, and then the rest of the book is other things, like we get this cop's journal where he's slowly figuring out what's going on, and that's kind of pointless because we've already gotten to see him figure out what's going on in the comic book stuff. But overall, would I recommend the Definitive Shi? I would not. There is a very little bit of this book that's really good, but the rest of it is really awful. I would not recommend that you pay any money to slog through 4/5 of a really bad book just to get through a little bit of really good stuff. So unfortunately, while this book has a really amazing and interesting premise for an interesting character, it's not handled very well. The character is not handled very well, in my opinion. Maybe later on, Billy Tusi took the character in a different direction. I don't know. But right now, the stuff that's collected here, I cannot recommend it at all, unfortunately. So those are my thoughts on the Definitive Shi. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be talking to you guys tomorrow about another book. So I will see you guys then. Have a great rest of the day.